Call of the Elder Gods is one of those sequels that improves on the predecessor in almost every way. It's clear that the developers took what made Call of the Sea so good and doubled down on that. Interesting puzzles, although maybe a bit too challenging at times for me, a bigger story than the first that spans a globe-trotting adventure and a race against a mysterious cult, and excellent character building that does a good job as a follow-up to the previous game, which, if interested, you could check out my review for Call of the Sea in the card above. Additionally, I'll talk about some spoilers from the first game, so be warned. But without further ado, let's get to the review. You start similarly to the first game, in a dream sequence. Evangeline Drayton, one of our dual protagonists, is having recurring dreams about an ancient stone city. After waking, she gets a call to meet up from the esteemed Dean of the Miskatonic Archaeology Department, Dr. Harry Everhart, the very same Harry who went on an expedition to attempt to find a cure for his ailing wife many years before, aka Call the Sea. And time hasn't been kind to him. He's tortured by what happened on the island and the ultimate fate of his wife, causing him to retreat from the world and only concentrate on work. What I found interesting is that the game actually lets you choose which ending you decided on from the last game, so long as you check the box saying you played Call of the Sea. Once again, spoiler warning, so either stop the video or skip ahead. Anyway, at the end of Call of the Sea, it's revealed that Nora is actually undergoing a transformation into some sort of immortal sea creature. She could either decide to complete the transformation and leave Harry behind, or decide to return back to the world and live out her final days, despite resigning herself to a slow, agonizing death. I'm fairly certain the transformation was meant to be the canon ending, as that's what's chosen if you don't say you've played Call of the Sea. However, my canon ending was that Nora chose to return, and the dialogue actually reflects this.
She died at home after a long disease.
Harry hated giving details.
I thought it might just be a small thing in the very beginning, but there are a few sections that would be different if the other choice was made. I don't entirely know to what extent, but I'm thinking of one particular phone call in a flashback that makes the post-credits scene more meaningful if that wasn't there. But anyway, Harry's been getting therapy sessions and medication from a doctor who happens to be a member of the secret society known as the Starry Wisdom Society. They are trying to gain access to a statue that's in Harry's possession. The Starry Wisdom Society becomes an antagonist for our heroes, and they eventually end up in a race to stop them from dabbling in some major world-altering stuff that involves time travel, mind-swapping, and an ancient civilization. Harry also has the added pressure of wanting to look out for his new ward, and that's not just because Harry's a good guy, but that Evangeline is actually the daughter of Frank Drayton, a man who went with Harry on his expedition and ultimately died on that island in the South Pacific. It all makes for really good stuff, and the writers have outdone themselves with upping the ante and still keeping it grounded with the characters. I enjoyed the Indiana Jones-like adventure, and it allowed the artist a larger variety rather than the tropical island of the first game. Each place is obviously just as gorgeously rendered, ranging from large manor houses, to the harsh snowy environments as Svalbard, to the land down under in Australia, and throw in an ancient city into that for good measure. It casts a wider net with its visual presentation that pays off in every way. Additionally, Call of the Elder Gods uses a lot more dialogue this time around, with Cissy Jones and Yuri Lowenthal both reprising their roles as Nora and Harry Everhart.
Oh, look what you've prepared. It's another one of your scavenger hunts, huh?
Of course, old pal. Now, if you want your present, you'll have to earn it.
But also Mara Junot, who does an excellent job breathing life into Evangeline.
Look, it's the engineer. I've seen one of those creatures before. In my dreams. In the stone city, in the jungle. He spoke to me in my dreams, Professor.
There are more interactions with other characters and even dialogue choices, as mentioned earlier. I imagine most options don't change that much, but they were nice in the moment and added to the story by giving the player some agency in conversations. Cinematics also play a much larger role, which add an extra layer to the storytelling, which, once again, I thought was great and an improvement over the predecessor. And I've obviously alluded to it by now, but Nora makes a reappearance in this game, and I don't just mean flashbacks either. In fact, Call of the Elder Gods opts to have a narrator this time around, where Nora takes that role. I know some voiced their dislike saying it broke immersion, and I can understand that, but I think it added to the story more than detracted. Having the narrator be a past character allowed them to have a more personal take when offering up little comments, and it also allowed the narrator to raise up what a character might be thinking, which was nice at times.
Such a graceful and elegant woman.
Evie certainly had a keen eye for beauty.
However, there were moments when I think she offered a little bit too much, which kind of broke the moment. One example in particular was when Evangeline was experiencing some sort of dream sequence and saw her dead father. The character is trying to process this, and literally right after that, Nora chimes in with and that definitely isn't her father, which, wow, maybe let the player come to some of those conclusions. Overall though, I think that having a narrator, and specifically Nora, as the narrator was a good choice. I'd also like to take a second to touch on the endings. Not a spoiler here, but I really want to commend the writers for wrapping things up so nicely at the end. I love it when stories give us aftermaths and resolution, good or bad, to what happened to the characters. Additionally, the post-credit scene for Harry was great and quite poignant because of the callback to the aforementioned phone call from earlier in the game. The next thing I want to say is a bit of a spoiler, so skip to the next section if you don't want that. There were complaints saying the two endings were pretty much the same. Although I'd say that first, they are different, but we're seeing how it plays out from the perspective of the other character. And secondly, I think that's the point. There's a conversation that plays during the credit roll that takes place after the events of the game. It suggests that because everything was alright in their time, it meant that no matter what choice was made at the end of the game, then the conflict would still be resolved. It was a good way to wrap up the story if they want to stop the series here, but honestly, I hope we see another one.
As far as the towers can move in that direction.
If you played Call of the Sea, then you'll already know what you're getting into here. A well-crafted puzzle adventure that makes the puzzles digestible because of its journal mechanic. I will say that this time around, the puzzles felt more complex. Many had several layers to them, along with possibly having to solve other puzzles in order to get to the main puzzle. Luckily, once again, the journal made it a lot easier to keep track of all the pertinent information needed to solve each one. Although, I'd say because of the added complexity, there were more notes on a puzzle which made it a little bit harder to parse, but not by much. That being said, there were definitely some head scratchers. In Call of the Sea, I felt a lot of the puzzles were intuitive enough that I didn't need to look anything up to figure them out. In Call of the Elder Gods, I needed some help to get through some of them. Luckily, the devs implemented a series of hints that you could look through to guide you through the puzzles. They start off general to help you figure out what you need to do, and then give you more specifics to solve the puzzles until just eventually giving you the entire solution. Most of the time I understood right away and could figure it out, but there were some puzzles where I didn't understand how you got to the solution and just inputted what the game told me. Many times it was just a nudge though to get me in the right direction, but the solutions were helpful. I guess, thinking about it now, I'm unsure if the puzzles were quite a bit more difficult, or if I just was lacking self-control and caved in faster than I did in Call of the Sea.
No, this isn't working.
Either way, it's a nice implementation to allow players to concentrate solely on the great story rather than needing to worry about the puzzles.
Yes, I did it!
I also liked how some of the puzzles utilized the fact that there are now two characters. There were a few that had you switching back and forth between characters, which felt like a nice way to evolve the franchise. I felt it was a bit underutilized though, and wished the game started with that from the beginning. I also liked how their backstories kind of played a role in how they interacted with the world, such as Evangeline being more technical and understanding complicated machines, or how Harry knew German and could read Nazi correspondence, whereas Evangeline would just say she couldn't make heads or tails of it. I'd love to see the devs return to this dual protagonist concept in a sequel. And like the last game, that's really it. There aren't any other systems at play here other than some dialogue sequences, so it's really just about exploration, story, and puzzle solving. However, I did want to point out something that was lacking in this game that I praised for Call of the Sea, and that was the ability to save anywhere. Why is that missing here? Instead, the game just uses checkpoints, but I was never sure where those checkpoints were, so it was a bit annoying at times to get back on and have to replay a bit to get back to where I left off. It just seems so weird that they had it in the first game, but then couldn't do it in the second.
Januar 1943. That means January 1943.
Well, yeah, that one's not too hard to guess.
Before I get into my final thoughts, if you're enjoying the video or found it helpful, then please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for more video game coverage in the future in the form of reviews and first impressions. And if you're feeling extra generous, then you can tip me via YouTube Super Thanks or consider joining my YouTube membership. Every little bit goes a long way in helping improve the channel. Overall, Call of the Elder Gods runs for $24.99 USD, and I put a little over 8 hours into my playthrough. While there is room for a potential second playthrough to see some different dialogue choices and the other ending, most of it isn't substantial enough to merit another go. Additionally, as with the first, the puzzles would be the same, so I don't think there would be any reason to replay it in that regard. But like the first game, I think that it's a bit expensive outright. But if you loved Call of the Sea and want to support the studio, then I don't think you'd be upset with your purchase even at full price. For all others, then obviously wait, as I'm sure will go on sale in the future. It's a game made for puzzle gamers in mind, but despite the higher difficulty for the puzzles, I still think the journal goes a long way to help ease non-puzzle gamers in like myself. And with the hints, there's really no need not to pick this up if the story is the sole thing that interests you. If you played the game, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't, then let me know if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, or if you have any other questions. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.